Next Curve.
Hey everyone, welcome to this Next Curve Rethink podcast episode where we will recap MWC 2024. And I'm Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, joined by Chua of AvidThink and Prakash Sangam of Tantra, Analyst. And just so that you know, if you don't know, both Roy and Prakash are renowned industry analysts covering the telco and mobile wireless spaces and more. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonard.
Yeah, it's and you guys are pretty much regular guests on the podcast, and so it's always great to have you guys on, and I'm really excited to have both of you guys on to do this recap because this should be really interesting. You guys always have great insights and takes that I think the Next Curve audience will greatly appreciate. And just so that everyone knows, we launched our audio podcast, so make sure to check it out on Buzzsprout. Just look up Next Curve Rethink Podcast and listen to us on the road, on your jog, and on your favorite podcast platform. And so now that I've plugged the podcast, gentlemen, have you had sufficient time now that it's been about a week and a half since MWC 2024 to digest all that stuff that we were basically slammed with when we were there?
Getting there. You're getting there. I noticed your photos finally went up, Leonard, on LinkedIn. So I think you finally crawled your way out of that hole. And I mean, I'm trying. I think I'm mostly caught up, but yeah, I think I've done all the follow-ups that I promised to do at in those meetings, but almost there.
Yeah.
Almost there.
Okay, good for you. What about you, Prakash?
Yeah, just to be sure, for some personal reasons, I had to cancel my visit last minute. So I covered most of it online. So unlike you guys who were there, I had more time on hand. So I kind of followed up to large extent how things were happening. But I missed all the personal connections and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, everybody was asking for you, just so that you know. So where's Prakash? You're like,
let's hear that. And
you're like,
I believe you and I hope you're telling me the truth, but and it feels good to believe you. Yes, I do.
Oh, come on.
No. It was true.
Come on. Yeah, it's true. Then it tells the truth. Then it speaks the truth. Come on.
Yeah, I don't kid about stuff like that. But anyways, gentlemen, really quickly, I mean, what were your impressions? And actually, the fact that you didn't attend, you were observing the event virtually is actually a really interesting point of view. And you're already plugged in, so it'll be really great to hear from you what you thought based on your remote participation. But maybe let's start off with you, Prakash, really quickly. What were your impressions?
I think one of the things I was looking for is there will be more answers to how 5G operators come out of this rut they are in, that they have done successful EMBB, but where are they going after that? I don't think there were very clear messages. I mean, people are talking about what could come next, but there was nothing tangible to latch onto saying, oh, this is what's going to be in next 2 to 3 years will be big and operators will start make money on it. I think that was a big miss.
Yeah.
Sorry to start with the negative note. And I think AI and Open RAN were the two large themes coming out of, and things were around them. Obviously, AI, you can't just escape the allure of AI, if you will, Gen AI and all the other AI, everything AI.
Yeah.
And Open RAN, I think it's becoming more real. We keep saying that. I think last year also we said the same thing. But again, the transition is pretty long. It is becoming more real. At the same time, people are now realizing the real problems that they have in making it really mainstream. And I think there are some trends emerging on how this thing will eventually happen, right? So that's at a very high level.
Yeah.
And there's some good announcements. I don't know whether you want me to go to the announcements now.
No. We'll leave it at that. We don't want you to shoot all the bullets in the revolver before we're
Yeah, that's at a very high level.
We even get things started. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So what about you? Roy?
I think, I agree with Prakash. I think the same themes that came across, even if you're remote, was the same themes that you saw on the show floor, right? No surprise. Again, I think, fundamentally, I think the carriers are still looking for creative ways of monetization, and they're trying, to give them credit, and they're also turning to their supply chain behind them and saying, help me, because if you help me, then I'll help you, right? So I think that's the reality of it. So I think that's good. But in general, I think it was less about sort of 5G, but it was more around the, how do I monetize some of the key elements in 5G itself, fixed wireless access, some of what 5G as a technology enables, not just the macro, but on the private wireless side. So seeing a lot of that. I mean, it was hard. I don't know. We should have just gone around and counted the number of stands without Gen AI. I think that would have been an interesting exercise.
Probably zero,
and maybe under 10.
Really close to zero.
So I think it was pervasive. But I would say credit to quite a few of the vendors, that at least I think the ones that we usually interact with, that they didn't try to overhype it. At least some of the ones that we dealt with, they were a bit more muted about it. I think they were wary of it. So I think that was good. I think, Open RAN certainly is still on everyone's mind, disaggregated RAN, and we'll talk more about it. But there is clearly traction now in Open RAN. Whether you buy into the single vendor Open RAN or the multi-vendor Open RAN, there's traction on both sides. So we'll leave it at that for the time being. Right. And telco APIs, again, I think it's important that we make progress. I think Camara and Open Gateway from GSMA are great. I think we all collectively warn telcos, I think, as analysts, that APIs are a way to get at valuable services, configure them, monitor them. But if you don't have those valuable services, the APIs are useless, right? So anyway, but
yeah, that is true. Yeah, and I thought it's basically back to pre-pandemic form for the most part, right? That was a very packed, very packed event.
It was.
So Prakash, you might have saved yourself by not going, because it was actually a bit difficult to get around.
It was.
All booths were super packed. So it was great to see all the activity and interest. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was how people were so down on 5G, just on the technologies themselves. And I just want to, the theme of the show was future first. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Why don't we put the present first? And I think that GSMA can do the industry a favor by really focusing on what matters, versus continuing to, float these aspirations that are so far in the future, may not even be possible. That it's quite useless to be talking about these things, and dedicating a lot of energy more into de-hyping things, because somebody wrote, there's an article that was written where basically saying 5G had failed, and it's like, well, no, 5G is 5G. The hype has failed. And so I think that is something that the industry really has to understand and embrace, instead of continuing to, find what the next hype is to get excited about. But hey, let's jump into the first thing that I really wanted to talk to you guys about. And you've already hinted about it. You both are deep into this. We are in sessions together about this all the time with many of the leading vendors. But let's talk about 5G infrastructure modernization, especially as it pertains to the RAN. And you've already mentioned it, Open RAN. So maybe we can talk about the state there and what you guys have seen in terms of the progress that you've kind of hinted at. So I don't know which one of you want to jump in first and share your thoughts, but
you want to go ahead first?
I can go ahead. I mean, look,
okay.
Open RAN, in dealing with ORAN Alliance and dealing with TIP, I think the good news is that Open RAN is running pilots and production all over the world, right? Over 150 that's tracked by TIP alone, right? And many more beyond that. And And we know of sort of big Open RAN deployments in the past, right? So the fourth carrier in Japan, Rakuten, with Open RAN, whether ORAN compliant or not fully, we'll leave that aside, but Open RAN for sure. And then Dish, right, with ORAN, sort of ORAN deployment. So we know that there are big deployments out there. We know that it's happening. But I think what gave me hope around sort of Open RAN deployment was actually the Samsung event where TELUS was up there saying, look, half of network has been sort of traditional RAN, and the other half now going forward, because we believe it's sufficiently mature, is going to be Open RAN. And obviously Samsung's part of that. But what was great was we're going to deploy Open RAN. They believe that massive MIMO with Open RAN is possible. So TELUS, the leading operator, believes that. And the other part was what they had stated from TELUS itself was 98% of the KPIs that they've measured, right, in their labs, actually not in their labs, in pilot deployments between Open RAN and traditional RAN, and 98% of the KPIs of Open RAN meets or exceeds that of traditional RAN. That's actually very promising. So I think that was one. The other one for me was actually something quite mundane. NTT Docomo saying that they're going to deploy Open RAN, in this case is NEC, and they were going to use hybrid cloud to do it. So it was basically hybrid cloud deployment, AWS, HPE servers, Qualcomm L1 card accelerated, right, with NEC RAN, NEC Core. But this is NTT Docomo with I think 78 million subscribers saying we're going to go hybrid cloud deployment with public cloud, private cloud, with an Open RAN architecture. And I think when you see something like that, I mean, on one hand, it's kind of mundane, okay, NTT, but this is NTT Docomo, tier one, conservative, right? I mean, big number of subscribers saying, we believe it and we're backing it. So I think for me, seeing that is great. I think there are detractors out there that say, look, Vodafone said Open RAN, and then they said, oh, Nokia, right? And then AT&T said Open RAN, and then, oh, Ericsson. Okay, fair. Single vendor Open RAN, yes, maybe, but I think Open RAN as a whole, as an ecosystem, is driving forward. It's not just Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei. We now had what I call tier 1.5. I don't know, they're happy with the name, right? The Samsung, the Fujitsu's, and historically NEC, we'll see what happens there. But the market has opened up a little bit, and there is hope. Disaggregation, Dell, HPE, Wind River, right? There's all these vendors coming in. So I think it's hopeful. I think this time around, I'm actually hopeful. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Prakash, what did you see?
Yeah, I agree with it. I still think most of the market will still go with the single vendor and Open RAN compliant, or whatever you can call it, Open RAN, single vendor Open RAN, right? I think what AT&T did was in a way smart and risk less. They basically use the same model. Okay, we'll still have a single throat to choke, but we push you to utilize other radios and others, right? So you still have Open RAN, but you still have the single neck to choke, throat to choke, right? That's one. I am still, I've heard all the vendors say this, but I have not seen a good uh, deployment wherein 64 or 64T software hardware vendors are different, multiple vendors working together, providing the performance that you can get from legacy. I think that still is still an unproven in my view. I mean, all the vendors I talk to, operators, they say, "Oh, we have seen it works, but I haven't seen that." I think that is a milestone that they need to cross. Then I think that will be the last major hurdle to cross in my view for it to be real. And other thing is, tell us Samsung. That's interesting. And Samsung kind of did a lot of announcement and seemed to be, catching up with Nokia, I think. And we used to have top three vendors in networking. It was Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung. Now it will be Ericsson, Samsung, and Nokia. So I'm a little bit worried about Nokia, how long and how far and how strong they will continue to grow. That's one. And since Huawei is still on legacy, which means lots of Asian and African markets may not go towards open RAN unless the other guys can make a real big case against Huawei in terms of cost, support, and so on, right? So,
Yeah.
and of course, again, as Rai mentioned, all the hyperscalers, I'm sure you guys were on as well, had a pre-briefing before Mobile Congress talking about Open RAN, Core, and all, right? So
Yeah.
it has happened last year as well, but the vigor at which the hyperscalers talking about telecom before this Mobile World Congress was much higher, and that is really telling to me without being there. I don't know how much they showed and so on,
Yeah.
but I think that's a clear trend, and they want to play a bigger role. How big, in what form, I think we have to see it. Right.
Yeah.
And then one thing, 5G, I mean, I know it's not really related. There was less noise about 5G advance. I would have expected a little bit more. I mean, there was only an announcement of, Qualcomm X80,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
for some reason, 5G advance was not a major theme. I know Open RAN and AI way. It's interesting. So it
Yeah.
also tells me that maybe we are moving away from the standard 3GPP timeline and that roadmap more towards other kind of enterprise model where bringing what sells and doing stuff that really makes difference to larger ecosystem, not just consumers, with higher speeds and so on, right?
Yeah, you're making a good point with that last one. I think the roadmap has lost its way in a lot of ways, and it's become a victim of verticalization, vertical diversification. It's something to talk about, I think, and observe going forward. Because you're right, there wasn't a lot of talk. 6G, there was almost nothing. Even though some people are saying, "Oh yeah, there was a lot of," no, there was no talk about 6G either. But I think for me, the most regarding Open RAN. I mean, it's turning into a hybrid RAN situation, in my observation, where there's still a clear recognition that some of the more traditional architectures and kits, and then, and types of architectures are still are still more performant. And it's also always a question of what people are comparing when they do their benchmarks. Typically, what we're seeing is they're either comparing older equipment, when they say traditional or legacy, not necessarily testing against the most recent and modern offerings from some of the more traditional vendors. So it's always a question mark there. I think what there is a clear recognition, even among some of the up and coming Open RAN compliant players like Samsung, is that it's going to be diverse and hybrid. There's going to be certain situations where you're going to go with a more traditional like kit than with something that's open. And it's like Woo Jin Kim, the president of Samsung Networks. I mean, what did he say? He said that in this Open RAN game, you can show up for tryouts for this football, using a football team analogy, but not everyone makes the team, and so, this whole Squid Game thing is on. And I think the real key here is how do you make Open RAN competitive versus the Huawei's of the world, the ZTs of the world, who may arguably not have the constraints of having to deal with Open RAN dynamic. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the biggest challenge for the Open RAN community. And so that's where I see this hybrid dynamic playing out, and maybe diluting some of the value proposition, the pure play Open RAN stance. So
yeah,
anyway.
I mean, I think the innovations, a lot of the innovation, the performance is going to be down in that split, right? I mean, the RU itself,
Yeah.
I mean, the RU itself is actually, well, if you want to be compliant, you got to comply with all the other elements of O-RAN Alliance and your SMO and your RIC and all those things. But I think fundamentally, I think what I think we'll see over the course of the next couple of years is I think based on what they're telling us, that 64 TRX is possible, right? Again, I don't know if it's going to be as energy efficient or whatever it is, but it'll be within 20% of probably the best situation out there, and weight wise and all that. I think they'll get there. And I don't think Huawei has any incentive to open up at this point in time, right? They'll just sell their vertical solutions, so there's no point. But I think Open RAN as an architecture, probably it's like SDN, right? So software defined networking, 10 years ago, I think SDN has won as an architecture, but the controllers and all those monetized, no, right? And maybe Open RAN as an architecture makes sense, but in the end, maybe you still have Ericsson on top, maybe you still have Nokia around, and maybe Samsung's single vendor Open RAN, right? Maybe. I don't know, right? We'll see, right? So architecture wins, but doesn't mean that you have a diverse ecosystem or the benefits of that, right? So we'll see.
I think it'll still be large players.
I think it has to be
right? Major in the market. The players might change, but I think the overall,
you have to have scale.
You have to have scale. I mean, exactly. Exactly.
I agree.
You have to have scale.
It's impossible.
You have to. The carriers will not buy from a small player.
Absolutely.
Come on.
I think what will be interesting is, how much hyperscalers who have deep pockets are ready to support this to win in Asia and your African market. I think that will be key. I think US and Europe more or less will go, it'll take time, but it'll move towards Open RAN. I think a lot of new deployments will be Open RAN focused, for sure in US because of the geopolitical issues. Same to large extent in EU. I think Africa and Asia, where they're cost sensitive, legacy coming from a single vendor, obviously it's much easier, and they don't have that much of expertise to manage and integrate all these things. So if Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung have to have a play there, just like how they did here, will not work. They need much more financial support to soften their impact, because the margins are low and so on. So, and which means China, Africa, and Asia, if they don't go Open RAN, that means huge amount of size of the market is still not Open RAN, right? So
well, LATAM too. So
LATAM too.
LATAM too. It'll be Huawei RAN. It wouldn't be Open RAN. It'd be Huawei RAN or ZTE RAN, right?
Exactly.
But maybe there's a dark horse. I mean, look, we got Geo, right, with Redisys with Open RAN, right? And if Geo can succeed in their own vertical in-house stack, so to speak, right? And it's going to be cheap enough, we know, because it's Geo, right? Could be interesting.
And their Geo, I think, is a special case that they are not only vertically integrated in the infrastructure, but content, application, everything, right?
They got everything. Exactly.
Vertical integration.
Okay,
Geo will. Yes.
No, this is great. This is great. I know we could probably go on forever on all this Open RAN-ish stuff, but we have a bunch of other things to talk about. So let's move on to the next thing, which is our second favorite topic, Open Gateway and the Kamara stuff and APIs and the API economy, blah, blah, blah. So
$300 billion, Leonard. $300 billion.
Who made that one up?
I think it was McKinsey.
Oh, geez.
Something like that. I gotta look it up, but I'm like, come on. But anyway,
well, here's the problem. People don't know what a friggin' API is. And I've been saying this for a really long time. I might be the first analyst to try to remind some other analysts that, look, do you know what an API is? And your comment earlier is spot on. You don't sell an API. What you do is you sell the exposed service. And if your networks are just not there to provide a differentiated or participate in let's say a global fabric of, some kind of killer service, there's nothing to sell. But hey, what do you guys think? And what did you see with Open Gateway and all this API stuff?
Prakash, you want to go first, but it's McKinsey, $300 billion.
When you have McKinsey or BCG, I mean, it'll never be, less than few hundred billion, right? I mean,
Okay.
otherwise you won't hide them, right? So yeah, I mean, numbers apart, I mean, it is been tried before, right? Hope things are different this time. I think a fully right now EMBB network itself has some functions that the enterprise and other can use, but if it when it fully develops with some of the capabilities like Redcap and others coming in, then I think there will be enough functions within the operator network that you expose. Right now, everything you have to work with the operator, and you have to go to the lab, work everything out, and they roll it out, right? I think bringing APIs, if they work, that kinds of breaks that down a little bit, right? You expose
Yeah.
APIs, and then operator, the vendor community can develop whatever they think they can sell. It de-risks some of this development from the operators who already cash strapped. So I think the concept wise, it's really good. A few things I think they can readily start off, like location would be one, secure communication would be another one. I mean, if operators ever get to and expose the data sets that they have about customers, and that's very controversial, through some of the APIs for even the AI crowd and so on. So there is a lot of possibilities. Even with what they have right now with the MBB, it'll be even more when we get all of these exotic things come up with your LLC and other things. I think what would be key is operators not being really rigid and looking to get an ARPU lift for each and every stuff they do, right? Or how many more subscribers I'll get, what is the ARPU lift I'll get for each of the things I'm doing. If the sooner they come out of that mentality, I think it might work. But I think it's very early stages, and I know I'm still I have not made my opinion yet on it. I'm still in the observing mode. But I think
That, yeah.
there are possibilities.
That's a good point. I just really quickly, the whole ARPU focused mentality. I mean, that's a mindset shift that I think the analyst community can help with, because it's not necessarily a case that Wall Street really understands what a change in business model implies in terms of new metrics. So that's a great point. Most folks that I've spoken to, or at least witnessed on Wall Street, don't get the nuances of change, especially when it has a deep technical root. But Roy.
Yeah. So been digging a little bit into this, been tracking the project since the origins of the Open Gateway and Camara, and I actually signed up for developer accounts at the telcos, right? So I have the Orange account, I have telephone account, and the Vonage DT stuff, right? So yes, been looking at it. I've gone through all the APIs that they have exposed right now on GitHub, or at least the list of APIs that they're tracking. And so a couple of things. I think it's great that the telcos are understanding the importance of sort of programmatic networks, exposure, and an API ecosystem. I think it's good that they are moving down that path. I think it's really valuable that the hyperscalers are joining them this time and bringing their expertise and and willing to bring some of their developer ecosystem into the mix. I think that's a positive, and some of the ISVs are looking at it too. So I think those are all great. I think there is now more momentum this time as opposed to previous APIs, that this is not the first time, right? But I think this time, again, it looks promising and hopeful. I think what I would say is that the difficulty I have so far in terms of early engagement, even myself looking at APIs and looking at some of those things, is that I think we need to realize in many telcos that what they're talking about is relatively rudimentary in terms of what they're offering today. A lot of them are talking about, it's valuable. SIM swap from a fraud prevention standpoint is valuable. You do a call and say, when was the SIM last swap? Great. But let's remind ourselves, Twilio had that API back in 2020, 2021, right? Maybe not all the carriers, maybe not all regions, but this is not new technology. And here we are saying, great, SIM swap location, right? And I'm like, yeah, but we're catching up. So you got to go further than that if you're going to prove value. And by the way, because you were so late to the game, the OTTs in many situations have alternative APIs or apps on the phone that that are not a perfect solution for it, but that give them 90% of the value. So you're coming along and say, I can give you another 5% more, which is great, but I'm not a developed ecosystem. I don't play in the developer ecosystem today. So I think the carriers need to realize that in order to play, the bar is a lot higher than they think, and they have to work a lot harder to get there.
Wow.
And they have to take the help of the hyperscalers who know how to do this in order to get there. I think that's one. The second thing, if you look at the collection of APIs that I have, it's kind of a little bit messy. So I applaud the need to sort of come together and normalize them. I think that effort needs to be worked harder, because if you look at the list of APIs, there's overlapping calls. It's not clean, because I think it was like, telcos, bring your API to us. Let's put it all here and let's expose it. I'm like, no. Yeah. Someone needs to normalize it, number one, so that you don't have these overlapping APIs, because I don't know which one to call. Yeah. Number two, the APIs are at a different abstraction level. So some of the APIs are more high level. Some of the APIs are low level. Some of them are cross domain. Some of them are single domain, right? So great. Can you guys please categorize the API? All the presentations I've seen and whatever documentation I'm consuming is like, blah, here's API. And it's difficult. It sounds, it's like API vomit. Like, it's like, here it is, right? And I'm like, no, please, I need help organizing it. Yeah. I need help consuming it, right? Working with it. So I think there is an evolution that has to happen. And I know Ericsson with the Vonage platform, that CPaaS is looking to help. I know the hyperscalers are standing ready to help because they see a value in doing that. So I think if that can happen over the course of the next 12 months, I think there is value here. But there is a lot of hard work, right? So yeah.
But interestingly, we're just talking about the APIs. And one of the things that I think is really still very important is the transition for operators, participating operators, to make the transition from non-standalone to standalone networks, right? So that, to the point that Prakash was making, you can offer more than, EMBB. You can start to entertain these new features that might provide some differentiation. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was, and you kind of hinted at this, Roy, is a lot of the APIs are tapping network, just functions.
Very simple functions, or OSS functions or BSS functions. Very simplistic.
Right.
Some of the very thin layer.
Right.
Yeah.
Functions, not services, not necessarily new network services.
Exactly.
And this is something also I find that a lot of people are getting super confused. So, starting off with not really knowing what an API is, and then now having to figure out what the difference between a function is and a service, a network service. Yeah. I think this is something that everyone's going to be grappling with for quite some time. And until, we get this, let's call it a critical mass of 5G standalone deployments out there that are pretty mature, as well as, operational stacks that can, participate in these, sort of shared networks, service economies. I don't know, man. I think a lot of the stuff is going to be very carrier specific.
It's carrier specific potentially, but there's a lot of work, because I think that the value in the service is, the more cross domain it is, or multiple domains, the more value you can charge for it, right? And the more end to end it is, right? And we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, but here's the interesting thing, and it's good. I'm glad that you brought that up. You can go north, south, and east, west with your capability design, right? So it's going to be really super interesting how all this evolves. And you're making a great point about rationalizing the API definitions and then categorizing them, but more importantly, I think in layers as well as
that's correct, in layers, different abstraction levels, different services, cross-domain services. There's a lot of work, but they recognize that. I mean, I'm talking to the DT guy, and they're like, "Look, Lord, we recognize that, right?" And so there's a lot of hard work, but at least they recognize it and they're working towards it.
And another thing, I think they mentioned, Roy, that they're trying to do it on their own. I don't know. They're very new to that ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. So if they can align with the hyperscalers, some of the even enterprise players who have direct relationship with the app developers, use case developers, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I think there is also a threat that operators see that, hey, will we become just a dump up, pipe providers, and then these guys will take all the cream out of it, value out of it. So that also is kind of playing on their mind as well, right? So, but without involving hyperscalers and some of the enterprise players who have direct relationship with the app developers, I don't think it's going to be a success.
I agree. I mean, they have to embrace and open up. And if they can't innovate, then the market's taken away from them. It's not really anyone's fault, right? So if they don't open up and embrace it, not going to happen. I agree with you.
Yeah.
They have to. Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen.
So I have a quick question for you. So, I mean, the whole idea of GSMA is basically through their standards. It's identical, very similar APIs across operators. So when you said you had accounts with Vodafone and
Orange
other,
and Telefonica.
so are their
Just
APIs identical, or you still
SIM
have to
swap.
develop
Yeah, you
specific
can
to
call it
that?
SIM swap. Yeah, so they are. So if they comply with that, then
GSMA,
GSMA open gateways, then the calls are similar, right? It's a SIM swap. But again, we're starting with very simplistic basic
Simple, correct.
services. So of course it's going to be the same. But I think the moment you cross domain, then it's going to be complicated because every carrier may have different things. So we'll see that. But I think it's in their interest to make it consistent so that my program can call across carriers. It's in their interest. And if not, the hyperscalers will enforce that, because when you call in the hyperscaler at the top level API and they broker, it's got to work, right? It's got to work, right? That's the hope. Keeping my fingers crossed that that's the case.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Otherwise, it'd be a mess, right?
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, really quickly, let's talk about AI. We can't have a discussion without bringing this up. So let's just have a real quick discussion about your takes on, this mythical AI native network stuff, and then what you saw in terms of the impact of generative AI. So
Prakash, you want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the remote guy's impression.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of scope for AI, just like anything else in networking as well. And some of it is already working, not Gen AI stuff, but some of it is some AI is already there, and others who are like smart, rule based, policy based. This is now everybody is calling everything AI, right? So you have to watch for that, right? So now everything that is little bit intelligence, even in there is some logic, then it's AI. So analytics and optimization, network optimization for performance optimization, there's a lot of scope, even with regular AI without going into Gen AI. And Gen AI, I think the I'm not yet sold on it, that hey, you basically, instead of making all these complicated orchestration config expert engineer doing these things, you basically give a text command and all of those be done on their own. I'm not yet sold on it. So I'm from specifically network related stuff, I'm still exploring the possibility and the advantages of Gen AI for sure. But I think there was a lot of news on edge AI. Qualcomm had this on device AI stuff, and AI PCs. I think AI PC has good use cases, which could be revenue earning for the people who are providing it, like Copilot, the things that Adobe has done, and so on. I'm still not very clear on the use cases for AI, edge AI on the device. I mean, Qualcomm showed these things working with optimization or without optimization on the devices. I'm not, other than just personal assistant, I don't see huge use cases for Gen AI on phone, but on PCs, I see the potential, right? Let me, and like we can go into specific, but let me stop there.
What about you, Roy?
But yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with Prakash, right? The AI, ML, machine learning, deep learning that's been there for network optimization, for all the other things that they've been there. We know they work. They actually work. So any time series stuff that's been there for some time. So the OCNNs, RNNs, LSTM algorithms that have been applied, those work. We know that. With regard to Gen AI itself, right, within the telco, I think customer service, we saw examples of it where there's a human in the loop and it's providing you until the next best action recommendations, sentiment analysis, more convenient than before. I think that's all proven, it's working, it's helpful, right? For sales and marketing, sure, it's a boost, definitely can help you there. On the network side, I have to agree with Prakash, it's still a little early. I think from a troubleshooting sort of not root cause suggestion, not root cause, right? It's sort of not the RCA stuff, but root cause suggestion. Seeing that's helpful, right? Pulling information from multiple domains and then developing some fine-tuned models to provide you with a root cause suggestion definitely helps reducing troubleshooting time. So that I do see. Recommendation, capacity planning, I'm seeing some of that work reasonably well. But in terms of the configuration on network configuration, the provisioning, I agree. I think I was having a conversation with Alex Choi, actually, Orient Alliance, right? And we were talking about what we agree on, and I think what we both agree on is I think if you have the intent and you take it into a model, and the model can be verified, and then the model is used to provision a network, I think that is probably safe. But sort of pure intent, go straight to network without any kind of modeling in between or verification, not going to happen. So I think there is some evolution that has to happen first in terms of intent to model verification, and then model push in terms of configuration. I could see that, but that is still early days yet. I'm still seeing a lot of evolution. Definitely not all the way there yet. And a lot of those demos are just that. They're just demos.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a lot of early R&D, product R&D, and POCs at best.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you're in POC. I mean, that's how early we are with this stuff. But one suggestion to the industry, all things that are called AI they're AI. Not all things that are AI are Gen AI. Yeah. And so stop calling, everything, Gen AI. Call it out, because maybe Gen AI is kind of new. There's all, like what you guys are saying, all this other incredible stuff that people have been working really hard on and being ignored.
And it works it works and has real tangible value right now.
It works.
Don't put that stuff in the same bucket as generative AI, because the last thing we want is the rest of these guys to go down with the Gen AI ship if it goes down. Right? Don't take these guys down with you. Let them be recognized. And that was the one bright spot that I will say. Generative AI inadvertently put a spotlight on all the underlying good stuff that everyone's trying to front end with a Gen AI chatbot. So that was one of the things that I noticed. I think going forward now, to both of your points, the big question is, what is the role of generative AI in all these different types of operational systems, from the network all the way up to customer service? Because I'm not quite convinced that it's great for customer service either.
Assistive with human in the loop, not directly. Not direct chatbots yet. That's risky, as we all know, right? Super risky.
I will note there were some vendors that didn't want to talk to me because maybe they didn't want to talk to me about their generative AI products. So I'll just leave that.
They'll bring the chatbot out next time, and then they'll like, talk to my chatbot.
Well, if it works, they'll talk to me, right? If it doesn't, they're not going to talk to me. But hey, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And, like I say, if your Gen AI stuff works, I'm probably the first guy you want to talk to.
It's a work in progress. I mean, look, fundamentally, all I can say is that, they're demos, and then they're like, oh, Roy, this is constrained. I'm like, oh, really? And I type a prompt and I break it, right? And I'm like, look, it's now talking about pets. And they're like, Roy, it's just a demo. I'm like, I understand. Sorry, I broke your demo. But here's the thing, right? Which is that if the guardrail mechanisms in place in your pipeline are not easily used, in other words, even for a demo, if the guardrail mechanisms are robust, and I say I put it constraints in, I shouldn't be able to break it, demo or not demo.
Right. Yeah.
So what it says is that the pipeline is not sufficiently robust yet, and it's a POC. So we have to get our way there, right? So I think that's what it, for me, that's what it means. Yeah.
But hey, this is great because this is, I think both of you, all of us actually, are giving a really good temperature check of where generative AI and AI in general is as it pertains to telco industry. So thank you, gentlemen, for that. Really quick, very quickly, okay, what would you like to see at MWC 2025? More or less of what?
I mean, maybe we can start talking about 6G. No, I'm kidding. No. I would like to, I think I would like to see in general what I saw is actually real world mundane operational stuff and show me how you did it. I think that is actually more value to me. I think, don't give me the flashy stuff, please. Yeah.
What about you, Prakash?
I think whether we want it or not, there will be 6G for sure next year.
Yeah.
So, more, show me more, what more you are doing with 5G, right? There are tons of opportunities. You've done tons of investments. I think just like the folks on Wall Street, there is more potential in that network that they're deployed. I think they have to work hard to make, to bring value out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm, AI or anything, I'm all ears, which makes them bring more value out of the investment they have done.
Yeah, no, I for a moment I thought you were going to say, "Hey, show me the money," but that would have been a good one. But for me, next
but
year,
without those words,
speaking of monetization, and this whole future first thing, how about present first next year?
How about money first?
Yeah, and then modernize. Let's talk about modernization, how you accelerate and enable operators so they can get to monetization. Because the path of to monetization requires a certain levels of maturity that most operators are not at.
And then one last I would add is, everybody talks about changing the business model. We all agree that the current business model may not be really helpful to expand beyond what they've already done, right? So maybe, GSMA is a operator body. Maybe they come up with a proposal. Gateway with the APIs is one. Maybe more proposals like that, which give some confidence to the operators to adapt it because they know it is coming from a group of their own, rather than some third party coming and suggesting, hey, you have to change business model, right? So maybe GSMA should work towards that gives operators more confidence to open up, and it helps them in the long run.
We'll form the modernization working group as well.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So see,
all right.
We put our heads together to come with a good workable solution, not just criticize things.
Yeah, great ideas. Yeah. So hey, thanks, gentlemen. Really appreciate you both jumping on and sharing your perspectives and thoughts on MWC 2024. And so to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you want to connect with Roy Chua, you can at www.avidthink.com. And you can also contact Prakash Sangam at www.tantraanalyst.com. And you can hit both of them up on LinkedIn and take part in their industry insights and research and wisdom. And they don't bite. So yeah, just like. And
we're nice.
Just reach out and connect, Yeah, it's awesome. All good stuff. And so please subscribe to our podcast, okay, the Next Curve podcast, and which will be featured on the Next Curve YouTube channel. And check out the audio version on Buzzsprout, or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Just, put in the Next Curve Rethink podcast. And also subscribe to the Next Curve research portal at www.next-curve.com for the tech and industry insights that matter. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Thank
good to
you.
be. Thanks, man.